Yeah! Coming to you live from WRUE in Tennessee, it's the Scribbling Woman.
Hi, I'm Nancy Rue, and he's right. I am the Scribbling Woman, and so are you. And that's why we're having this conversation. Here, we talk about the writerly life that is unique to you, no matter your age, your season, or where you are in your creative journey. You are now an official Scribbly, so let's talk. You know that whole thing about writers being totally solitary people who need hours alone in order to create their stories? Yeah, that's only about half true. When it comes to writing itself, yes, we need our own private playground. We need our own art supplies that we don't have to share with anybody. We need our by myself time just so we can get into the zone. But when it comes to having a whole and delightful writerly life, even the most reclusive among us needs at least one other person to help us cull out the delight that is so essential to the writerly life. Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Women in 6 weeks while basically locked up in her room at Orchard House in Concord, Massachusetts. I've seen that room. It's not very big. Most of it's taken up by a rather large bed, and her desk was made out of a windowsill. I don't know how she did it without going mad. Actually, I do, because she had her sisters to remind her that she meant to astonish us all, and she did. Margaret Fuller felt isolated as she broke ground for the rest of us women in the writerly world in the 19th century. But she had Elizabeth Peabody, and she had George Sand, the artist on whom the musical Sunday in the Park with George was based. And she had Elizabeth Barrett Browning, all to keep her from giving up. Dorothy Sayers, one of the original queens of crime in the 20th century, she was a full-on extrovert, and she relied on her, what was officially called Mutual Admiration Society, because even us big old E's need encouragement. Now, in this series of episodes, we've been exploring ways to cultivate and maintain delight in the writerly life, learning to be playful, discovering the toys we need, embracing the joy of learning new stuff, and creating our playground. Now we turn to who to invite into our sandbox. It's not just any old other fellow author who will do. It's the lucky writer who hasn't been stung by another writer's supposedly well-meant criticism. If we truly want to approach our whole creative lives with delight, we need the right playmates. That in mind, let's go into the playground and find out who the right people are for each of us individually. Let's start with who they aren't. They are not people who pounce on the downside first, whether it's about your manuscript or the publishing world as a whole. This will never get published, or none of us will ever get published. We don't need people who would rather talk about promoting books than actually writing them, unless that's where you are right now. We don't need people who are happy to have you encourage them, but whose eyes glaze over when you start talking about your own creative pursuits. They are not people who love to tell you what you should do. Basically, our writerly kindred spirits will be people who don't make us feel like we have no earthly idea what we're doing, and it's a good thing you have them to set you straight. They don't make you feel like you're somehow less than, like you're wasting your time and maybe should try pottery instead. Now, that's not to say that a writerly playmate should never say a word that isn't, oh my gosh, everything you do is brilliant. Not everything we write is up there with Louise Penny and Alice Hoffman, at least not in our first draft. And not every purpose of having a playmate in the writerly life is about critiquing each other's work. In fact, that's the least of it. We're not in the sandbox to throw sand at each other or either admire or tear down each other's castles. We're there to help each other move forward, creatively, emotionally, sometimes even physically. So what do we look for in a scribbling sidekick? I'm thinking there are three main characteristics, which you will, of course, refine to your own unique self. First of all, someone who finds the writerly life as delightful as you do, or at least longs for that. She loves to play with ideas. You both know each other's characters and talk about them like they're real people. I have several people who will say to me, "So, how's Freddie doing? How's that story coming along? Because I really think that she should blah, blah, blah." There's a group of young women writers in Colorado who get together on the regular. They're all fantasy writers, and they understand each other's fantasy worlds that they've created. And they talk about places like Revelia as if they actually existed. And they don't think, is this weird? Because of course it's weird. We make up stuff and try to get people to believe it. We're supposed to be weird. We need people who will be weird with us. This person likes to seek inspiration together in unexpected places. Let's say you sit in a coffee shop and you each observe 5 details that might be used in your respective works in progress. Or maybe you take a walk and first get out all of the whining, and then you each capture 5 things in nature that you could incorporate in your current work. Maybe you just like poking around in a bookstore together and sharing what grabs you, especially when it comes to writing books. It's possible to have a writerly pal and never even show each other your work. But when you do share, this person is honest in a way that moves you forward, and you do the same for her. She always points out the positive first. I love your voice, not your book is remarkably plot-free. And then she simply makes suggestions or asks questions. It's not, I don't get it, to, I need a little more clarity on that last bit. It's not, this whole section needs to go, to tell me about the purpose of that scene. That leads us to figure out things for ourselves rather than give up because we feel totally clueless. We get enough of that from editors and contest judges and people who write ugly reviews on Amazon. We don't need it from our friends. Again, your writerly relationship is not only about that. Neither of you is probably in a position to tell somebody else how to write anyway. It's about helping each other become confident in our own process and do it with delight. Thirdly, this is someone who celebrates the milestones with you, no matter how small they may seem in the grand scheme of things. Let's say you wrote for 2 hours this week when last week you could only get 30 minutes in. That totally calls for lattes with your friend. You had a breakthrough on a plot twist that was previously making you want to start drinking heavily. You tell her, and she raises 1 glass of wine to you, or a Bailey's and coffee. You clicked the Publish Now button on Amazon, and your writing buddy practically does cartwheels. Maybe she actually does, because she knows you do the same for her. And that goes for commiserating when the setbacks come, as they inevitably do. This week, I discovered, as I was about 300 pages, 75,000 words into my current novel, that the premise is absolutely absurd, and I needed to either start over or do some deep creative revising. More than one writerly friend said, well, isn't that just part of the process? But that was after they said, ouch, I hate it when that happens. Nobody said, what were you thinking? The ransom was a bone marrow transplant? That was ridiculous. This month, one of my scribbling sidekicks was wounded by some really harsh criticism from a contest entry that threatened to paralyze her creatively. We went to lunch and quietly trashed the judges over fish and chips, and then we found a way for her to nudge herself gently forward with delight. A stiff upper lip is not a requirement for the writerly life. In fact, it works against us. We need each other for the cheering and for the crying. So where do we find these playmates? Well, if we're fortunate, they live close by, and we can meet in person with cappuccinos or even on each other's front porches. So when you meet people, let's say at church, at your job, at your kid's soccer practice, somebody else's baby shower, don't be shy about saying you're a writer, because if you're looking for writerly companions, synchronicity is going to set in, and sooner or later, someone's going to say, me too, can we talk? Maybe you're the type, and this won't work for everybody, but the type that wants to get writers together on the regular. So you put up a flyer in the library and you meet on Zoom first, see how you gel. Then maybe you come together at Starbucks and take over one of those big tables and see what happens. It doesn't even have to be another writer. Maybe it's your next door neighbor who does pottery, or the office mate who's into photography. Any creative person can share the delight. It's just that a fellow author really, really knows what you're up against, and who knows? That girlfriend who takes a watercolor class may know another writer she can introduce you to. Just have to spread the word. Many of us don't have access to local writers, which is when we turn to what is best about the internet. Google can be our friend here. Writing Facebook groups, somebody to connect with in an online course or a master class, who is hanging out on Instagram, other writers. Zoom is also of great benefit. We can be face-to-face in a safe way. And if we only need 45 minutes, it's free. Now, this is a good time for me to tell you about the Scribbling Women. And let me say first that this is a no-cost group of writerly women, so I'm not advertising for profit here. We meet monthly. There are 86 of us. Not everybody meets at the same time, but we meet monthly for a themed Zoom session on some aspect of the writerly life with lots of space for sharing and discussion. Some of us meet bi-monthly for sharing Scribblies live, and this is where Scribblies read excerpts of their work out loud for encouragement and for questions. No critiquing unless they ask for it. Some of us meet on alternate months for workshops to add to our art supplies, always with time for discussion. We have a really lively Facebook group where we share our milestones as well as our setbacks and our challenges, where we talk about what inspires us, where we ask for help, and we get it. Otherwise, I wouldn't know Cherie Lasota, who designs my interiors for all of my books and does my covers. I wouldn't know Barbie Haley, who does all the editing. I wouldn't know Sarah Greek or Anne Fraley, who helped me put together a book trailer. And every week, there are 2 opportunities to join silent scribbling, where writers come together on Zoom, we chat some, and then we write, each of us in our own space, audio muted, just knowing there are other people there writing too. And at the end, we say, here's what I did, to a chorus of, woohoo, good on you, girlfriend. Out of all of that, many of our Scribblies have found their scribbling sidekicks. I love it when I hear, Sarah helped me so much with blah, blah. Or, I know all I have to do is text Janelle and she'll text back with something that'll get me right out of the crazy tree. Or, if it weren't for Janelle, I would have quit a long time ago. If you would like to be part of the Scribbling Women online organization, simply go to facebook.com/groups/scribblingwomen. Again, that's facebook.com/groups/scribblingwomen, and just request membership. You can also go to my website, which is nancyrue.com/supporter, and click message me on Facebook. I'll get back to you and we'll chat and find out if this way of cultivating delight with the right playmates is one that resonates with you. You will find your playmates. You've already started. You're here. So let's scribble on together.